All right, let's wait for us to show up on Twitch. And make sure we're working on YouTube as well. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about plot holes, plot pedestals, and the iron law of world building. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
You know, on this podcast, we talk about games, but we have been talking about games so much. Okay, we've been really good, all right? So we're allowed to have a really indulgent sort of episode. And this is my topic, so I will give sort of the. So here's kind of the story so far. Okay, for those of you who respect the continuity and want to put this podcast on a plot pedestal. Okay, a long time ago, a YouTuber named Patrick H. Willems came out with a video called "Shut Up About Plot Holes," where basically he made a number of different arguments, some of them good, some of them not so good, about the ways in which sort of we as a culture engage with the concept of a plot hole. Plot holes have a pretty negative connotation, but people sort of accuse things of being plot holes as sort of a shortcut to say thing bad when it doesn't quite constitute that, right? And that actually there are plenty of times where a story has done pretty good work to pay attention to its plot holes, such that these sort of criticisms are sort of underlying and sort of false, basically. This was Patrick's sort of take, and there were some instances where I think he was sort of on the money. Like most of us would probably agree that we ought to give sort of stories and narrative some amount of grace to not explain all of the intermittent details, right? It's the kind of thing where when a movie starts and someone says something to be true, we all kind of have to take the movie for granted. Like we have to take the movie at its word about this kind of stuff, right? If they say this thing is as powerful as it is, the movie doesn't need to justify that to itself. It just kind of needs to state the obvious. That's pretty fair. But then there was some stuff in that that I would consider to kind of be unfair, which is to say that you don't need to bend over backwards and give stories sort of an insane amount, I guess I would say, of sort of grace when it comes to this sort of stuff. It is pretty bad form to be in the trenches trying to bend over backwards to make certain things make sense, which I would even say we have engaged in at some point on some of our sort of like reviews or whatever, right? When we talk about movies or whatever, there are probably some things where I have justified something by saying, well, it could be blah 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 blah, and that's just a pretty bad argument. This is the kind of thing that I don't really think he was very kind of like convincing on. But in general, I do sort of think that the way in which we were engaging in plot holes in whatever it was, like 2018, 2019 kind of thing, was probably pretty poor, and we can think about it a little bit differently. Very recently, a guy put out a video, a much smaller video that had much less of an impact, probably because it was a spicy, that basically said, what is the opposite of a plot hole? And in that video, he goes into depth onto a number of different topics about what happens when you kind of overcompensate for the threat of a plot hole, which he doesn't name himself, but I called this a plot pedestal, and I think of it as sort of a plot pedestal, which basically sort of says, what happens when you take your plot and your continuity too seriously and you overcorrect on the other end of the equation, and you make sure that the nature of your continuity is all completely gussied up and accounted for and whatever, and in doing so you have kind of created a whole new Frankenstein's monster because of a myriad of different sort of things. So that's kind of that's like the place where I guess we're sort of starting when it comes to this.
Just to close the loop on it, when Buddy pitched this episode to me, it occurred to me that this dovetails with one of my long running ideas, which is the Mango's Iron Law of World Building, which is a world that goes on for long enough will become stupid in the kind of like short terms, right? Like, eventually we keep explaining things, you end up adding in something ridiculous stuff because you kind of like run out of interesting content to put in.
And what would we say are some of the good examples of this? Like, obviously sort of midichlorians are kind of one. Like, that to me is like a very straightforward kind of Mango's Law of world building failure.
The classic version of this for me is always when D&D gets to like outer space, essentially, right? Like when
Mhm.
when the world start building out like the intricate details of like the outermost planes or like different celestial bodies that maybe you could somehow get to, that's where it goes. Like I don't think that like, I think Pathfinder dodged this because Starfinder is like a separate product with full support. But basically, in like a mainline D&D game, right, you will get a, the last book of a, edition will be like the last setting book will be like, and there's a planet with like, centipede centaur people, right? And there's like rules for how many rounds you can hold your breath on planets that don't have the right atmosphere. It's just kind of like that's where I think you kind of get into the things are getting a stupid level of things, right? And it has some of this problem with D&D because it's like, oh well, we have to have the space hippos that are like safari experts because they were in D&D 2e at some point, so like they're a fan favorite, right? Like that kind of thing. This is also like the nth iteration of dragons. Void dragon is actually not bad, but like the last bestiary's worth of dragons that have like neon dragons, like made of
Yeah, I
elemental
totally
neon.
understand this. It's like in 3.5, you had the monster manual. Okay, you introduce chromatic dragons, cool. Monster Manual 2 introduces metallic dragons. Oh, there's dragon, but they're good guys. Whoa, that's so interesting. Monster Manual 3, well, you have to do a set of dragons. We're gonna do the crystal dragons, and they're fucking neutral gamers. And it's just like, oh, okay, I guess. Crystal dragons, as would be a pretty amazing example in my mind of Mango's Iron Law of world building sort of in action, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
Um okay. What when it comes to so basically I think that the thing that the Iron Law of world building is getting to is kind of the end game of what a plot pedestal creates. When you are thinking about plot holes and not thinking about plot pedestals, you end up in a world of Mango's Iron Law of world building. Is that sort of the hypothesis that you're setting forth?
I think there's an aspect of the plot pedestal thing. So one of the things that stuck out to me about this plot pedestal thing is that it's not necessarily just covering the plot holes. It's covering the plot holes in a way that you wink at the continuity, right? It can't just be that like, someone accounted for this eventuality. Is that it was, specifically intentionally accounted for this eventuality by a plot character where like, you can look at the cameras like, I remember that, right? Like that kind of thing. And I think that also kind of gets you into the Iron Law of world building stuff where it's like in the attempt to be very intentional about everything and like, kind of like, connect things in like a narratively, like a presumptively narratively satisfying way can get you into these problems, right? Like this is where, because like, what doesn't have any plot holes? The real world, because it definitionally can't, right? But the way you get away from that is just like stupid things happen for dumb reasons, right? Like, and it's not everything's intentional. And, just the one that pops in my mind is like Star Wars, right? Like there's more than 3 families that affect the outcome of the galaxy, right? And so like, you can just like, you don't have to worry about this kind of stuff when you've got the real world. And the like fictional universes that care about this kind of thing have this like desire to like tie things back into in ways that like a fan will recognize, like I know that person, right? Like that kind of thing, which doesn't necessarily carry forward.
Yeah, okay. I think I agree with this. Part of this is that I think serialization is something that is core to the way that we tell our stories these days, right? And this has been true for a long time. This is something I've said on the podcast a million times before. This is like my Iron Law of world building, which is that as we have become more complex enjoyers of media, which is to say we're spending more of our time doing it and we are consuming it in sort of forms and fashions that are enabled by all of the technology and whatever else sort of around us, people are better at understanding kind of this stuff. The obvious example here is sort of comparing I Love Lucy to, I don't even know, Friends, or like Parks and Rec or something. When you look at I Love Lucy, like a classic Gilligan's Island, classic sitcom, right? One of the core tenets of that sitcom is that things reset at the end of the episode, right? You are never getting into a kind of a position where you have to remember long stretches of deep lore in order to engage with sort of, with sort of the work, right? Because the idea is that you have a very straightforward status quo that you can return to. Anybody who watches can kind of get into it or whatever, and you just kind of like keep going. When you look at modern sitcoms, actually a great example of this would be Futurama. I've been watching the newest episodes of debuted in 2000, in the year 2000, and it was rebooted for the fourth time in 2024, 2025. I think it was 2024. I think then 2025 is later this year. The new season drops, kind of thing. One of the first episodes of the 2024-2025 run of Futurama calls back to an early episode that was all about Amy and Kif. Amy and Kif are a couple. The idea is Kif is an alien. Kif gets pregnant because males get pregnant in his alien species. And Amy has a lot of anxiety about being a mother. But the end of the episode, kind of the resolution of the episode, is all of their spawn kind of hop off into the swamp, and Kif goes, "We'll see them in 20 years because that's what it's like for my species." And Amy realizes that she doesn't have to be a mother. She can actually, whatever. She can come back to the swamp in 20 years. She has plenty of time to get ready for it, right? Well, one of the first episodes is 20 years have passed. They go back to the swamp, and Kif and Amy are now parents, right? That is a clear version of this effect in action. When in the 2000s, when Futurama was a straightforward sitcom, it didn't need to go crazy about its own sort of continuity. It could just reset at the end of the episode, and this was how it reset. This is how every episode does include Amy the mom, right? But now every episode of Futurama does because of this plot pedestal, right? Because they are going back to this, this swamp episode, and they go back to all of that kind of stuff. And for the people like me who have watched Futurama of times and remember that episode pretty well, we can go, "Oh my god, I remember the episode where Amy really wanted to play on her party board and ended up turning it into an ironing board and deleting the calendar, and that was funny because of sort of jokes." We are more media savvy now than we really have ever sort of been, and that opens the door for intense serialization to sort of play out. And to me, this is where plot pedestals come from, right? The more that the more that the audience becomes tolerant of this kind of thing, the easier it is for kind of artists, writers, whomever else to sort of indulge.
That makes sense. I think I buy most of that. Just as a curiosity question, is like Amy effectively the same age as she was in 2000, like the Simpsons characters tend to be?
Yeah, technically, I don't know. There was time travel shenanigans, so maybe they're all supposed to be the same age or whatever. I didn't really follow that kind of side of it super closely, but whatever.
I mean, it would be very funny if they just kind of did the Simpsons thing where, like, Bart has been the same age for, like, 20 30 years at this point, right? Like, wink at the fact that, like, Amy's effectively the same age because nobody ages in the show, but like, the real world passing time that makes that work or whatever. Like, because like I think you can get away with it a little bit better in comedy because you can like dismiss some of like the plot hole parts of it out of hand. Right? You just be like, oh well, it's a joke show, right? Like, so if it doesn't ever come back again, like past that, who cares? If it sticks around, who cares, right? Like you can do what you want. It matters more, I think, in like dramas. And
I actually think I probably agree with this, especially because when you see reboots of dramas, like there was it Columbo or was it another law show, like procedural? Maybe it was Perry Mason that came back or whatever, but they made it a period piece because they didn't want to kind of deal with the fact that Perry Mason was originally from like the 50s and 60s. It was a completely different time, and you can't really have Perry Mason with a cell phone, or I guess you could, but that's like a pretty hardcore kind of adaptational change. So what did they do? They set it in the 50s and 60s. Perry Mason originally is not a period piece. It's just a show about the present day United States, right? But when you reboot it as the period piece because you want to preserve the continuity of it, that kind of thing. And I definitely think that that's sort of I guess I would say an important feature of this sort of behavior, right? Um, I think there's kind of an orthogonal thing. In one end, we're sort of describing two kind of higher and lower sort of like pieces. A plot hole simultaneously is attacking kind of larger continuity issues. One that would kind of recently have a pretty simple plot hole problem to me is, and somehow Palpatine returned, right? I think that's a pretty straightforward plot hole. It's maybe the most basic plot hole I could possibly think of, which is to say that at the end of the 6th movie, Palpatine gets thrown down an elevator shaft and and the space station he's on explodes. And somehow there was cloning and whatever and all this other sort of stuff, I guess, or whatever. They don't really address it that well. He's just back. And they paper over it with somehow Palpatine returns, right?
This is
Would you call that a plot hole?
No, because to me, a plot hole is a thing that isn't explained and doesn't make sense, right? Like,
oh, interesting.
Like, it's like a bad.
Okay.
I would call this like a bad plot development, right? But like a plot hole is like, he was over here, and that's just too much. Just kind of like a continuity error. But like,
yeah, because I definitely think continuity errors are a thing. Like, so an easy one I can think of in the movie Hercules, at the very end, there's a part where Hercules kneels down and he puts his hand in the river Styx, and then they shoot it from another angle, and Hercules is on a precipice, and the river Styx is like 100 feet below him. It's the kind of thing, if you watch it, it makes perfect sense. And it bothered me as a kid, and it still bothers me now, right? Like this massive continuity error. But I wouldn't consider that a plot hole. That's just a continuity error of the state of where this cliff was in relation to the river Styx was inconsistent, kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say, what's a good example of like what I would call like a true plot hole, which is like,
yeah, I'm trying to think. This is why I like, and somehow Palpatine returned. Obviously, it became a fucking meme, but I think it became a meme because it is just a plot hole. It's a plot hole that they drew attention to, which typically plot holes, I don't think you draw attention to them. They are kind of created in their absence, but I just think that The Rise of Skywalker is such an inept movie that them drawing attention to it doesn't change the nature of it being a plot hole. Do you know what I mean?
See, I don't know, like the one that popped into my head, which is like not a great example.
Is that what you're saying?
Like, it's like, why didn't the Eagles drop the ring into Mordor, right? And there is an answer in like the Tolkien books, right? But like to like your average moviegoer, it's like, it can fly it in, right? Like, type of deal. And it feels like if you are paying close attention to the mechanics of the plot rather than kind of like the themes, then like, this is a thing you should at least like, wave at and be like, like, oh, I think the official answer is like the Eagles are technically neutral, right? Like, and they don't want to like get involved. But you could even come up with like, in the books, Sauron, the Eye of Sauron isn't a physical manifestation of a thing, but they made the decision to like just like have it fucking shoot down an eagle, right? Like, like, oh.
Well, so the other one, I would actually say this is the best counter argument, because this is a pretty good example of sort of a plot hole. I actually think of it as a good example of a bad plot hole, to be honest. Which is the ring wraiths. The ring wraiths are riding sort of fell beasts. The fell beasts are big, powerful, essentially dragons. They're called fell beasts. They're not called dragons for obvious reasons, right? But whatever it is, the ring wraiths fly now, and the fact that they fly means that Sauron sort of has his own air force, and in the same way that you just, you got to respect that kind of thing. It is only when the ring is destroyed, which destroys the ring wraiths, that gets rid of the fell beast, that allows the eagles to actually fly into Mordor, because it's essentially like blowing up the enemy air force, I guess. It would be the way that I would sort of justify that. But whatever the case may be, that is maybe a pretty classic example of a plot hole. I think of it as a bad one, though, because I do think that, like, anyway, yeah.
I would say another classic one is like, why does Buzz Lightyear freeze when the children come in the room if he doesn't think he's a toy? Right?
That's a great one. This is maybe the best plot hole I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Right, because like there's no good explanation for, like, you are forced to like maybe to do something about the world of toys, right? In order for it to make any sense, and it's never explained. As far I don't know if it's ever explained in the. I think I watched 4 once, and I don't remember if there's a 5th one or not, but I don't know if it's ever addressed or anything.
Yeah, I never watched 4. I do think there's a 5th one. I never watched 4 or 5.
But this is kind of like a, well, if this is the rules on how things work, why does, why does it not work here, right? Like type
Yeah.
of deal. Um,
Yeah, and then I do think that I think there are a number of different sort of like bad plot hole examples I could probably think of, but these are typically kind of like bad faith arguments that I don't think are. So, for instance, play like one of the things that Patrick says in his original video that I would definitely is that like characters are allowed to make bad
yeah,
decisions, and so a good one for this in the Avengers. In the Avengers, Thanos has one of the powers. He has the Power Stone, right? The blue stone. He gives it to Loki in the form of that or no, that's the Mind Stone, actually thinking about it. He has the Mind Stone. He gives it to Loki in the form of Loki's staff and basically says, "Hey, go whatever, get the cube. The cosmic cube is the Power Stone, the blue one or whatever." Um, at the end of that movie, they keep Loki's staff, and it feeds into Avengers. The next Avengers movie. It eventually creates the Vision and stuff like that. What if Thanos' goal is to get all of the soul? Get all of the not the soul stones. What are they fucking? I hate my life.
Infinity
The
Stones.
Infinity Stones. Yeah. If his goal is to get all the Infinity Stones, how come he sacrificed one? And it's like, well, you can sacrifice yeah, he had an incredibly powerful piece on the board and he was using it to go attain another powerful piece on the board. That did not work out in his favor because the good guys stopped him. But that doesn't mean it's a plot hole, right? Thanos made a bad tactical error. He made a strategic error, essentially, is what it would kind of come to. That's not that kind of thing is not a plot hole, right?
Yeah, I mean, and like I think part of this is just like people want to criticize, but sometimes is like, like I've seen like the thing where like if people just talked, then the plot would resolve, right? Like describing that as a plot hole, and that's not a plot hole. That's just like poor writing, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so I definitely agree with you there that like people are over describe things as plot holes. Do you think this ties in this plot pedestal? Do you think you see people avoiding these types of scenarios in a misbegotten attempt to avoid being perceived as having a plot hole?
Yeah, I think this is the core failure of a plot pedestal. And actually, I think of it as the reason why I like it so much. Nobody had ever posed that question to me. But as soon as I saw just the video title, what's the opposite of a plot hole? Immediately it crystallized in my brain. And I was like, oh my God, I totally get this, which is overcomplicated kind of continuityization of a thing. And I actually think of myself in terms of like as like a I don't know whatever a storyteller, writer, what as a storyteller for like D&D games is basically what I'm thinking. I think of myself as someone who overindulges and creates essentially plot pedestals. It's actually, funnily enough, one of the reasons why I wanted to go to a deeply episodic structure, because I felt like a thing that was common to happen in D&D games of mine. It even happened in this episodic game that we're playing, is I introduce a character whom I think I have done a very good job of setting up and all this other sort of stuff, and people go, "Who?" Or like you refer back to a plot point and people go, "Wait, when was that? Oh, that happened? What was sort of the details of that kind of thing?" And what that kind of thinking refers to in my mind is sort of the overcomplication problem that comes with the creating plot. Excuse me. I'm like burping in the middle of the podcast. That comes with creating plot pedestals and putting them sort of everywhere. Because and the worst version of this is maybe something like Solo is probably the thing that I would kind of say is like it's this cannibalistic overcomplication of just every little piece of minutia. This is true plot pedestalification.
Yeah,
If we can think
I
of
think
it
this got to be like the truest example, right? Like his like
Solo.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I did not question why his name was Han Solo. You could have just said like that's his name, right? Like I didn't even the dice that hang from like the rear, like like that are apparently hanging somewhere in the original trilogy that I don't even fucking know about, right? Like I didn't care about those types of things, right? Like,
Even the things like there's the little chunk. The Millennium Falcon has that kind of little chunk in there that shoots off. I guess it's like an escape pod or something like that. It's like that did not need to get explained. We just didn't need any of this kind of thing. Maybe in my mind, the worst version of this is the Kessel Run. I actually think the Kessel one is maybe kind of the most good-natured and worst effect in a certain sense. Plot pedestal that I can kind of think of, because it comes from not quite a plot hole or anything along those sorts of, but just this like simple error, right? In the way that it's written, the Kessel Run line in Star Wars: A New Hope doesn't make sense, because a parsec is a unit of distance, not a unit of time. But Han Solo clearly says it as if it is a unit of time, because he says, "I did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs," as if that is like a thing to brag about. And everyone assumes, myself included, everyone assumes that means, wow, he did this thing really fast. But because a parsec is a unit of distance and not a unit of time, that doesn't make sense. And Star Wars continuity has bent over backwards to try and explain
Many different
this
times.
fucking doofy line. Yes, many different times. The original explanation was,
I'm going to tell you what the real explanation is.
Yes.
The real explanation is that George Lucas thought parsec sounded like unit of time because sec sounds like second, and that's the actual explanation for all of this, right? Like, but yeah, no, there was the original explanation was something like, how close you could get to like because the Kessel Run's dangerous. It's like how the distance is like how close you could like thread between black holes or something like that.
Yeah, there are like 18 black holes in the hyperspace lane that goes from wherever to Kessel, and it's the only way you can go. And you do it in a short distance because you cut as close to the black holes, and if you fall into it, you die or something like that. I think this got explained in a novel somewhere.
I mean, the entire concept of the explanation of how hyperspace works, I think, is its own kind of like version of plot pedestal. And this makes sense to me because, like, this is what like enthusiast B canon material is for, right? It's to like, well, actually, I'm going to write the technical guide on how to like, service, the courier class ships because somebody cares about that, right? Like, or like,
I just want to say, Lou in the chat says the boys are back. I'll do the honor of pausing Bake Off to listen in. Listen, I appreciate that. Okay, fuck the Great British Bake Off. That's my,
Hey, Great British Bake Off's great. We'll talk about it in the back half. I've watched the first 2 episodes.
Oh God, I've walked. Okay, you got me. I walked into that. Yes. Also, I will say for the record that this is kind of our new time. Sunday nights is just sort of the best. I don't know. It's hard to get together these days for a number of different reasons. But Sunday nights has been the time that we are trying to be the most consistent. So for your notes. Okay. So the Kessel Run, and then in Solo it gets a completely different explanation, which is about like the hyperspace lane is a thing that we have never seen before, and it's really, really small, and you can fall off into like, it seems like to me like Eldrazi are in there. Do you know what I mean? Like, because they do slip into it in the Solo movie. To be fair, I haven't watched Solo in a long time, so I could be misremembering. But do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I frankly I don't remember it at all. Like, I was like, this is kind of like the first explanation, but like, more suitable for film, less technical type of deal.
Yeah, but all of this just comes down to justifying that one line, and I just think that we are allowed to sort of kind of let it go. Star Wars is pretty rife in my mind with plot pedestals that are stationed later in order to kind of account for sort of other things, and some of them, in the same way that not all plot holes are plot, like I think that there are certain things that people would sort of attack as plot pedestals. And some of them I would actually say are pretty okay, right? Especially in like the most recent set of the most recent set of shows are doing kind of a lot of building about whatever else, and like the Ahsoka show canonizes this and that, right? Or like Andor. But I think that this speaks to a deeper thing. When somebody is critical of something, right? They are looking for sort of plot holes, but I actually think that the same kind of thing can happen for plot pedestals. And a good example of that might be something like Andor. In the most recent Red Letter Media video on Star Wars, which we covered, where Mr. Plinkett sort of is talking about how Andor is a really good TV show that is made worse for being in the Star Wars universe, which I don't particularly think is true, to be honest with you. And he references how in the prequels, the designs for the Death Star are given to Count Dooku on Geonosis, right? In Attack of the Clones, and he is going to deliver them to, presumably Emperor sort of like Palpatine. And one of the things that Andor really concerns itself with is the construction of the Death Star. The first season of Andor includes I guess I don't want to. I don't really know this maybe is sort of weirdly a plot pedestal. There's a portion in the first story in the first season of Andor, not for spoilers, where you see a factory, and in this factory things are getting like this thing is getting made, and the point of this, the story doesn't care what the thing is. It's not even a MacGuffin or anything like that. It is just literally you are watching the factory do its thing and make a thing over and over and over and over again. But at the very, very end of the show, they show that the thing that they were making were these little hex. Actually, not hex. I guess maybe there's 7. They're like these little hexagon things that make the frame on the outer version of the Death Star. So in the very beginning of stages of creating the Death Star or whatever, you're watching these droids that are putting the things that were built in that factory together. That's kind of a plot pedestal in a way, right? But I would actually say that that's a good one. This is perfect. I want to know stuff like this. It is neat and interesting to know that this minor detail that nobody cared about or didn't really matter actually keys into a pretty important part of sort of the mythos, and it implies a certain level of, kind of like gravitas and interconnectedness and all this other kind of stuff. That's kind of cool. You like to see the idea especially in a show as realistic and grounded and down to earth as Andor, take the construction of a moon-sized space station seriously. That this thing is it takes a galaxy-wide effort that, includes these little things that you see in the fucking factory. That nature of things, I think, is something that people sort of attack, but they ought not to, right? You can have a plot pedestal essentially be minor and forgivable, and we can just kind of move on for it. And I would sort of say that maybe just the fact that I wouldn't describe it as bad. I think that this is a neat kind of callback. Doesn't make it a plot pedestal. How do you feel about that side of it? That side of things?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd be hard pressed to like on the fly give you a definition of like what makes a plot pedestal, or like what makes a piece of like explicit continuity good or bad, right? Like I'm trying to imagine, is there a version of like finding out how Han Solo got his last name is done well in a way that I don't think is cheesy or like annoying. It's like maybe, and then have you ever heard of like, this is like a weird internet poll, have you ever heard of like Surf Dracula?
No.
Okay, so this is like internet post where it's like, Surf Dracula is a show from like the 60s about a Dracula that surfs. It's like the 2010s, with a Prestige remake. The first season is just about how Dracula like finds his surfboard, and you don't even like see him like,
Oh my God, I totally get this. This is like the Daredevil TV show where Daredevil doesn't get the suit until the final episode, right? And you don't actually see him suit up in the all red Daredevil outfit. That makes perfect sense.
Except in this concept, right? Surf Dracula is about a surfing Dracula. If he doesn't have a surfboard, he's not even surfing, right? Like he's just like doing like the extended intro of the character for the entire first season, right? Because at least in the Daredevil TV show, he's doing Daredevil shit, right? Like, and so like there's a very like, because I was thinking, it's like, well, could you like have him be called like Han for like the first series, the first season of a TV show, and like at the end have someone be like, you're a real solo talent kid or something like that, right? And like, have it.
Okay, here's an interesting question. Can a plot hole ever be good? Do you know what I mean? Is a plot hole, even innocuous plot holes, we would probably say are mistakes. Hypothetically speaking, if we would remake Toy Story today, we would fix the plot hole about Buzz Lightyear, right? Even though that's a pretty innocuous one, doesn't really matter. Toy Story is still a really good movie, all the rest of it, right? We would just have it so that Buzz is maybe, I don't know.
I don't know if I'd say if it's ever affirmatively good. I could see like the argument that like, the Buzz plot hole is so minor and unfixable that's not worth like warping the plot to explain it.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's fair.
And I would say continuity ambiguities can be good, and like I think very affirmatively can be good, right? And And I think that's kind of like on the like edge. Like a good plot hole is one that's not actually a hole. It's just an ambiguity that doesn't ever get explained, and that's fine, right? Like uh what's a good, like, I'm sure there's the problem is that all the ones I'm thinking of eventually get explained, but like you could imagine a world where we never find out who Joe Chill is, and it's fine that the identity of the person who killed Batman's parents is just an anonymous criminal, right? Like I
Yeah,
think
wow, it is actually really hard to do this, especially with certain things that we used to consider because Joe Chill is a little more common. But I'm thinking about the secret identity of the Joker. Un- we got that in 2020 after the Joker had been a running character who was kind of defined by the fact that he didn't have a canonized origin for 80 years. That kind of sucks, to be honest. But it is
is
what
that what
it
they were
is.
talking about in this video, was like the canonization of.
Yeah, Batman 3 Jokers. This is why I'm thinking about it. Batman 3 Jokers. So to explain this. Okay. Um DC Comics continuity is so crazy. There are a set of universal gods, okay, called the New Gods, right? They are it's called the third world. So this is characters who maybe would reference Orion, Big Barda, Mr. Miracle, or like a number of them. Darkseid is the most famous one. Darkseid is a new god. He is the new god of ultimate evil, and in the anti-life equation, all the it was very cosmic, crazy sort of shit. Um, in an arc about the not the old gods, in an arc about the new gods, Batman got to sit on the chair of, I think is, God, I'm almost blanking on the name. Lou's going to correct me if I'm wrong, of Metatron. And if my memory is correct, God, I just want
That,
fucking
I was
thing.
like, isn't that like a Transformers character, or like
Well, Megatron. Well, Meta. What the fuck is it? It's not gonna be Metatron now. It's Meta. Now that I've said it out loud. Metatron's chair. Is it Metatron? Ooh, the Mobius chair. Oh, Metron. Fuck. It's just Metron. Okay.
apparently
So
Metatron
Metron.
is a like a character in like deep Talmudic mythology. So there's that.
Yeah, this is just me inserting an A where there is no A. Metron is this like this observer. He sits on this chair. The chair is called the Mobius chair, and it contains sort of knowledge. And in this arc, there's this thing about the new gods. I think they're like the spirits of the new gods are infusing the members of the Justice, all of the rest of it. And at a certain point, Batman gets Metron's spirit and he sits on the Mobius chair and he has the opportunity to ask the Joker's real name. And the chair says there are 3 Jokers, right? Which was like it was a crazy. Eventually they made a series that explains this, which is there is the Joker, the criminal mastermind, the Joker, the comedian, and the Joker, the I can't remember what the third one is sort of like called. Maybe like the gangster or something like that. There's sort of these 3 archetypal Jokers, and they more or less match on to kind of like golden age, sort of bronze age, sort of modern age, we would maybe kind of say, like versions of the character. So it's kind of basically what it's doing is attempting to look at the entire history of the Joker, including stuff that is goofy and dumb, like the Joker trying to poison the water supply or whatever, and trying to have that match up with the same Joker who takes a crowbar and beats Robin to death. You know what I mean? The one who's doing goofy shtick and the one who cripples Batgirl and murders a child are not the same person. Because hypothetically speaking, if you think of them as the same person, there's just a level of cognitive dissonance that kind of breaks. But for a long time, the identity of who the Joker was sort of this secret, and maybe you could kind of make an inference that there's some level of kind of plot hole there or something kind of along those sorts of lines, right? Because it was sort of just this ambiguous, unknowable sort of thing. If there is such thing as a good plot hole, the unknowability of the Joker's origin would probably be a pretty good answer to that question.
Yeah. Well, now you've got me. Now you've got me curious about this Joker stuff.
I remember. I think I didn't even think I read the comic. I think I looked up like a summary or something because I just wanted to kind of wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
There's a whole period of the Joker's actually life where he has a bullet in the center, or not a bullet, a bullet hole in the center of his thing because he gets shot in the face. I think by Jason Todd. I think Jason Todd shoots him in the face, and it turns the Joker into a pretty sadistic psychopath. And eventually the Joker cuts off his own face and staples it back on, and because he flays himself, the smile is now like his stretched face. It's like some horror movie shit, man.
Wow. Yeah. I don't know.
This is a plot hole, by the way. Lou in the chat says, good but still annoying. World's greatest detective can't find this one weird dude. Batman 3 Jokers does explain this by saying that Batman actually did find the Joker's secret identity, but that it's just not material to anything. Because the Joker had a wife and a kid, and he just didn't see any reason to ever act upon the secret information of the Joker. Because the Joker is just this, whatever, amorphous. It's not like he is motivated by his child and wife or anything. It's not like he goes back to his fucking apartment with whatever, that identity never mattered. But technically speaking, this is kind of a pretty good example of a plot pedestal, the one used in the video that inspired this whole thing.
Just as a quick question: are the 3 Jokers like supposed to be like 3 like facets of a personality, or are they like 3 actually separate human beings?
They are 3 separate beings. Yes.
Okay.
3 separate people.
Okay. I don't know. The other thing I've seen is like around Twitter recently, like the absolute Batman art has been floating around, and so like the absolute Joker's like a almost like a dinosaur looking person. It's like completely which is like a new thing. It's from Scott Snyder. I don't know who that is.
Jesus Christ. Wow, that is fucking, that's a little.
Yeah, he looks almost like a demon, like a classical conception of a demon.
Absolute Batman is like the Ultimate Universe, where it is like a whole new continuity. In Absolute Batman, he wields this axe, the bat. Have you seen that axe? The other thing is Bruce Wayne is poor. I think this is the big thing about Absolute Batman. This is what everybody tells me. Batman is poor, and so he is sort of like fighting crime from a street level, and there's no sort of, I don't know about it. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, the tweet I saw was like a quote tweet of the Absolute Joker being like, "Can we have Batman train with the Absolute monks because like he's not getting a break here because it's like all the art of these villains, which like looks fucking nuts." I guess the art style is just like really blocky because Absolute Batman looks like he's like a refrigerator with arms. But that's interesting, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think I would probably say that a plot hole can never be good. The best it can kind of be is innocuous. And I do sometimes think a plot hole is correct, which is to say that I think you're right about the Buzz Lightyear. Fixing that plot hole probably creates more problems than it solves, even if that plot hole sort of sucks. And so it's technically wrong in the sense that, in a perfect world, you could imagine that it wouldn't exist. But in the practical world of our own, of our own reality, where we have the story that we have, if you were to remake the movie, you would not go back and fix this plot hole. And in fact, when remakes do happen and they do attempt to fix plot holes by doing this kind of thing, we mostly find this an annoying process. Mostly what I'm thinking here are like Disney live action remakes that do this pretty constantly. Almost always they are kind of commenting on the there are things that account for the criticisms that are levied at the original.
Or like about the discourse even, right? Like,
yeah,
I never watched, but my understanding is like LeFou in the Beauty and Beast remake is a lot more like, is like, I don't know if he's explicitly gay, but he's a lot more obviously gay in a way that like just kind of like, he had like a vaguely effeminate voice in the first, which means he's gay or something, which is its own.
Yeah, the Beauty and the Beast remake is actually a really good one for this, but for a different reason in my mind. In the Beauty and the Beast remake, Belle attempts to escape pretty proactively, I think twice, which is an answer to what I would consider to be a bad faith criticism, right? There's this whole idea that Beauty and the Beast is a story about kind of like Stockholm syndrome, right? But like that's a pretty shallow understanding of what's going on in sort of the film itself. Also, Lou does confirm, oh, he's 100% obvious gay. I think that's true, especially in the Gaston song. There's like a whole thing about where he's like, there are the girls who are fighting over Gaston, and LeFou is like shoving them aside because he doesn't want to. He's jealous. Anyway, by the the thing that makes Beauty and the Beast not a story about like Stockholm syndrome and not a story about like a protagonist who isn't proactive or whatever is that Belle is bound by her word and she agrees to the bargain that the Beast gives her. The Beast says, I will let your father go if you stay here with me, and she respects that because she made a deal, right? And there's something, and like that's not a, she is not doing a bad thing, and the movie is not, or the whatever, the story is not bad because Belle does not choose to, you know, sort of like escape. What happens in the remake is they do take that criticism sort of seriously, and as soon as Belle is incarcerated, she immediately tries to break out twice. And what this does is just make her duplicitous and untrustworthy, right? And it kind of weirdly justifies the Beast's bad behavior because now she is no longer sort of a good prisoner who is abiding by her word, and the Beast has anger issues and he is displacing that anger on her and then comes to feel guilt at his own injustice, right? Now he is a prison warden cracking down on the rebellious prisoner, as he kind of deserves to, because she made a deal with him and then immediately went back on it, right? And it's like those kinds of things I think are representative of sort of the problem of fixing, of like of erecting plot pedestals over plot holes, you know? Like,
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Actually, I think you're right. I think that's a pretty perfect example. Something I wanted to jump back to, just kind of like I think what kind of motivates some of these things too is like you were talking about how in a lot of your writing, or you're writing for like storytelling for like the D&D games, you tend to overwrite a correct characterization.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking about it. One of the ones that happened all that recent, like one of the ones that happened recently is you know, you guys walked into the final boss room. I describe the boss, and then you guys go, who is he? Do you know what I mean? And this is me thinking I have, you know, like I have explained the thing, or I have sort of set things up and the payoff didn't quite, you know, like didn't quite work. And I think part of the reason for that is that there's quite a lot of sort of setups and payoff in this complicated sort of story, and probably things would have worked if I was a little bit more straightforward and direct about them, but there's like a lot of weird plot detritus that is it. We'll talk about this more when we like do a whatever a debrief of Heretic Heroes, right? But like I was very proud of the fact that the Soul Storm is triggered by COVID. I knew that from the beginning, right? That, oh, the war starting up and getting and these brutal casualties, and I knew what the beacon was at the time, is fueling the beacon, and it overcharges and it kind of bursts with all of this power. And it what basically it does is it sends these souls farther than they normally go, which is why souls started cropping up in the prisons, right? Which had theoretically never seen that kind of thing. I knew all of the answer to that question, but this is like a classic plot pedestal. I think we could have just had a Soulstorm and never answered what it was, and we would have been perfectly fine. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean this is as constructively as possible. I think you probably should have just like had someone say, you know, oh, it like either like had us like automatically like pass the check, or just like had someone say, oh, it happened because of all of the deaths in Kovalgrad, right? The fact that it took us like so long to figure out what was happening, I think kind of like muted the response there. But I do think that was like a good thing to do, because like one of the kind of like hard links to the story is that one of the characters is from Kovalgrad, right? Like it is a dwarf that's like part of that. And so I think that makes sense. It's just kind of like, I think it's more kind of like a presentation thing than anything else.
That's fair. I think the same thing is also true for Uranus. And also maybe I'm just beating myself up because I don't know, whatever. We tend to be like critical or whatever, right?
Yeah.
There's a version of things where I say he looks like this, and you realize it's the exact same figure that you saw in that statue. This is Eurus, the first prophet of the Leonin hierarchy, right? But now you understand that Eurus isn't actually a prophet. His brother is. He is aping his brother's power, which is fueling the beacon, and Eurus is the catalyst who has been controlling that power this whole time, right? There's a version of things maybe where it's a presentational issue.
Yeah, I would say like off the top of my head, like the thing that surprised us all is like, we expected it to be his brother, which I think part of the problem is like keeping the names in your head isn't always the easiest thing to do. But like you could have, you could have said like it's not what's his brother's name again? I'm sorry, Terej. It's not Terej, right? Because that's what we were expecting to see, right? Like, but anyway.
Yeah, and I also think that there's a whole extra side of this, which is that because the Leonin hierarchy is editing information, there are times where I had to kind of give you guys false information that later gets, in a certain sense, retconned, but not really. It's just that the nature of the sources was kind of untrustworthy. But keeping that all straight in your head for a not all that weekly D&D game where we will sometimes miss 3 or 4 weeks. I actually was complaining about this to a friend of the Cassarian, where we were talking about kind of the weekly cadence of the game, and I was talking about like there are times where I have made mistakes because I am misremembering my own details. Like I'm misremembering details of my own game just because I wasn't in the world long enough and I wasn't remembering how all of this stuff kind of like worked.
Yeah. No, I mean, we can save some of this for like the after action report
we'll talk about this in the big Heretic Heroes debrief.
But the reason I wanted to come to this is like something that like popped into my head while we were talking about some of this stuff earlier, is like, in the real world, right? Like, if we don't understand why something happens, it's like, oh, this is like, an undiscovered mystery of science, right? Like we eventually built it with knowledge, or like if you're religiously inclined, like, God wills it that way. And like, if it doesn't make sense, it's just because you don't properly understand like the nature of the divine or something, right? The problem with a lot of these, fantastical worlds is that like somebody built it that way, and like somebody built it that way, and it is, I think, hard for an author to like embody the kind of like, well, it's the noble nature of the divine. They have in their head the real reason behind it, right? And that's, I think, where you get into these kind of like, these kind of like plot pedestal places, which intersects with the kind of like, the iron law of world building, right? Which is, the desire to like make everything connected in a way that is known, narratively satisfying, and within like, a single human's comprehension, right? Like, part of the reason why we've got like such, like why this, you don't get these like problems in real life is that like one person can't understand all of the pieces to like, why like, like we know generally how like stars form, but like all the constituent pieces, like, like where like, how like the hydrogen comes together or whatever. And I don't understand any of this, so I'm probably getting this entirely wrong, right? But like, the amount of detail in like a real thing that would resemble this is just so much that like it's like these are like 1, maybe 2, 3, 4 authors building a world, and like you're just like not going to be able to establish the right complexity, and that's where you're gonna kind of hit these walls.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I also think that it's a problem of sort of the power. I think of this as the power of coincidence. And there's actually a really good example of this for Heretic Heroes. I don't know that I want to get into it, I guess, but like basically part of what I'm thinking about is like, have you ever thought in a D&D game or like in Skyrim or something? I think about this in Skyrim all the time. All of those dungeons are so unlooted, but that's just not how that works in the real world. Like the Great Pyramid of Giza, like we found, I think it's King Khufu, right? We found King Khufu's burial chamber in the 1800s found, right? But it had already been looted because people had found it before and they stole all the gold and all the valuable stuff and they carted it out of there, sort of thing, right? And so what happens is like, it's something like Skyrim, you have dungeons all over that nobody has touched for eons or whatever, right? And it's like, no, actually, people have been here. It's kind of why the Heretic Heroes version of this is there was the room, the gallery with the Ushtabi that are shooting you, and there are bones all over the floor. And part of that is that other people have run this dungeon before and they have failed at it, and you are looking at the people who fucked it up. Do you know what I mean? This also happened in 7th Expedition in the Tomb of the Blood King. One of the core pieces about the Tomb of the Blood King is that the players were finding notes, little cheat sheets basically, that were from people who had been, another character, Kunam, one of the 10 Tomb Kings, went into the Tomb of the Blood King, and he left his own sort of notes on the wall. And so the players are not just the first person to go in this dungeon in however many millennia. People actually have been inside of this thing, and they have died to the traps, right? And I think simultaneously that's sort of a plot pedestal that kind of ruins the mystique a little bit of like dungeon diving, but also at the same time I think of it as like a greatly important sort of aspect of realism towards the, just kind of we all understand that the nature of these things is that they don't go unexplored, but that people are not always as successful as you, and they are going to die, right? Like that kind of thing. You guys were able to figure out the Ushtabi in the gallery in a way that, because you are the player characters, the protagonist of the story, was better than everybody else who walked into the room and stepped off the black marble and got shot by the gigantic magic arrows.
The chat, Delph says, the fucking pyramids of Giza didn't have Draugr in them, which I think is a fair defense.
That's fair.
Do we want to go back? Do you want to address Lou's criticisms of the beast?
A deal made under duress is indefensible. That is fair enough. But also at the same time, it's kind of like the Martin Luther King nonviolent protests against racism in the South, right? The fact that they are abiding, or that they are not abiding by the law, because they were breaking. It is specifically their sort of good faith interaction, I guess I would say, with police and all of this kind of stuff that drew attention to sort of the monstrousness of the deal. And I think the exact same thing is happening.
Also, if I wanted to make a very strong defense of this, right? Like, I'm not super familiar with the laws of 17th century France or whatever this is supposed to be, right? But I believe we were supposed to take that the beast imprisoning Belle's father in his castle for theft and trespassing is not exactly totally out of the realm of it's not like we had well coordinated police forces at that point in time, or legal forces, right? That's just kind of how things went. So I don't know. She willingly trades herself for the arguably just imprisonment of her father, right? He did steal an apple from the beast, right? You could say that is a cruel thing for the beast to have enforced against him, but is, I think, theoretically a thing that he has he is a noble that owns the land, right? There's a thing.
I see what you're saying. This is sort of attacking the word duress, right? The idea is that Belle freely chooses to take the deal that is offered to her because her father's life is so valuable to her, and that it kind of to say that it is under duress sort of weakens the argument that Belle is, or weakens the choice that Belle is sort of making.
Yeah, and also, right, we put people in prison under duress all the time for breaking the law, right? They don't want to go to prison, right? Which
I
is
guess that's true, yeah. I guess that's fair. It's also what is under duress. I once had an argument with my dad once that it was slave labor, that he was making me do slave labor by making me mow the lawn around the house as a teenager who had a set of chores that he had to do. And I just very quickly I reached the logical conclusion of, you are making me do work and I'm not being paid for it, and I don't have a choice. I can't not do it, and that's slavery. And and then my dad was like, okay. I think what he said was tough, and that was it. So, and then I mowed the lawn, but like, it's like that kind of thing. Was I under duress making the deal to, I guess, implicitly live rent free and go to school and all of the rest of this as a 15-year-old child? I kind of technically, right? But I think we would all say that it's a pretty fair deal.
Yeah. No, there's it's, I mean, we could go real about this because like I do think there's like an issue with like there's a whole thing with guilty pleas, which I'm not going to go into here because it's like totally a field of what we're talking about. But like,
oh my god, I know exactly what you're going to say. It's like the way that the state sort of like forces guilty pleas on people because nobody wants to do a trial. Like 99% of cases end up in pleading guilty, no contest to things because everyone just kind of agrees that a trial would painful, and there's the implicit threat that the trial's not going to go your way, and if it doesn't, the judge is going to like get on your ass, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
It's not implicit, right? It's like it's like
I guess you're right. That's true.
It's really like if you don't take this deal, we are going to throw the book at you, and even if you're pretty sure you're going to win, you have to fight that case out, and like you will if you lose, that's like you can either take a year or like risk 10 years, and is it worth it, right? Like that kind of thing. But that's a whole other thing.
That is a little, yeah, fair enough. I get you. Anyway, fucking Star Wars, okay.
Devil the Chances. I don't either, but considering they were mad enough to do all that head chopping, I assume a prince like the Beast would have a lot of legal ability to imprison people for apples or whatever, which is
that's fair. That's true. What do you like the idea? I'm actually interested in the question because I am sort of, one of the things I do, I guess, is sort of like design kind of like games or whatever that I feel like I would want to play in. I like the idea of sort of like a dungeon that has been traversed by others, kind of thing. How do you feel about that as like an idea? Is that a plot pedestal, or does it remove? I would almost sort of say it removes the mystique. This is the danger, that it would remove the cool mystique and how special you get to feel because you are being you are the first people to enter the tomb of the Blood King, which has sat unopened for 10,000 years or.
Yeah, I think there's space for both, right? I don't think like the idea that just because like the tomb of Khufu was raided means that like every dungeon that you explore has to have had someone who attempted it before makes sense. But I also don't think it means it's like bad, right? Like I think it's interesting environmental storytelling. And trying to figure that stuff out is cool. So I just think I think there's space for both things. I don't think
fair enough. Makes sense to me.
There was I feel like
it was also this was something I was thinking about when it came to the rats. You guys learned that the rats had only infiltrated the bottom of the prison very recently, and that was because I was like, there's just no way they're down there for that long, and like nobody would figure it out. You know what I mean? They only could have been there for you guys could be the first to discover them if they've been there for, but otherwise, like there's just no way, kind of.
Yeah, assuming things are going the way we take them to be going. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, the one that bothers me the most, this is probably the biggest plot hole in Heretic Heroes that is going to haunt me to my grave, which is that you found a book that was 28,000 years old and it was in a soggy pile of shit or something. It's like, it would immediately decompose. Are you kidding? A book lasts 3,000 years down there? Come on. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's ways you could talk around, right? Like it's like the peat bogs, right? Like in Ireland, where like you find perfectly mummified corpses.
I guess that's fair. Yeah, that's
or like true. It's a holy book, as like by matter of like
blessed. Yeah.
The gentle repose for books. I'm sure that's like a thing. Yeah, if you cast gentle repose on a tree, or it's like pages like untearable or something.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. That's fair. Yeah, who cares? That makes sense to me, especially because
that is a plot hole that doesn't need to be explained, or like if it does, you just you can either say like magic, right? Like that.
It's funny to me though that it was one of the important things. I guess, did you guys know about this? That Ushran's brother, whose name I don't even fucking remember. It's wild that I remember this, but I don't remember his name. Ushran's brother. That was how he found out about Terej. Is that he was in the Uh, not the catacombs. Catacombs are under the city. What are they called? Under the trench works. He was in the trench works and he discovered the name Terej, and then he just like looked into it and figured out this stuff about Terej, and he filled him with so much doubt that he walked through a gate of light and killed himself unintentionally. Yeah, trench works, great name. Yeah, it's like that kind of stuff. I think about this constantly when it comes to sort of continuity, and I think part of that is like there's a level of satisfaction to these sort of Swiss watch kind of clockwork plot structures. A good one that I would think of would be something like Hot Fuzz, weirdly. Hot Fuzz is a movie that is very tightly plotted to just really slot together perfectly. Everything in that third act shootout or whatever has been set up over the course of the movie with just this incredible attention to detail. And I feel like that's kind of I don't know. That's like there's this satisfaction of watching something like that. And this is kind of an Edgar Wright thing. I think he's just good at this in general, because you could probably say the same is true for The World's End. The same is true for the what's the one he did before that? Shaun of the Dead. Same is true for Baby Driver, right? You know, the whole point of Baby Driver is that it is literally timed to the beat, right? And I just think that that's like a really satisfying kind of like way to tell your stories. But the danger is that you overcomplicate things by putting in a bunch of fucking plot pedestals.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I didn't even pick up that Ushan's brother like found it in the trench works. Like, you just told me he found out about Terej, and I wouldn't have questioned it. I'd be like, okay, and like, continued about like my
Honestly,
day.
I maybe didn't tell you guys. I don't know, maybe you didn't ask the question or something like
Yeah.
that. He found it in the trench works. That's the answer, but I
Sure,
don't remember.
But, like, I didn't ask the question, right? Like, like he somehow found out about Terej. I don't care how he did it, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that makes sense, right? Like, not all the questions need to be answered. I don't need to know that, why Ushran was named Ushran, right? Like,
it was actually not a book. It was the Look 'em Up machine.
I mean,
Oh, it was the Look 'em Up machine. Yeah, you're right. Because that was we did talk about that when you guys actually went to the library, because you searched the name or something like that, and you found, and I think you asked the question, who's the last person, and I said it was Ushran's brother, who I still can't remember the name of.
yeah. So funnily enough, like, the mechanism of the look 'em up machine was a thing that actually like was like a thing that was like stuck in my head for a while. I was like, I mean, I guess it's magic, but like it's just kind of like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder, like, not necessarily like how it works from like a mechanical like, not as interested in like,
But like, how would the world be different if you had the Look 'em Up machine through the version of Magic?
yeah, essentially, or and like, not how the magic works to make it work, but like how it functions, right? Like, like, oh, can you, like, how specific do you need to be? Like, does it handle misspellings, that kind of thing, right? Like that kind of, because like a lot of magic in D&D works on intentions in a way that like you just kind of like, it's magic, it knows if you're trying to, like, be a dickhead about it, right? Like, and does it translate into, like, if you spelled Terej incorrectly, right? Like, would it work because it like knew like the idea that like if you like randomly like typed like you slammed your hand on the keyboard and Terej came out, right? Like, would that work, or is it just like, or does it just, is it just like
Honestly, I think the biggest plot hole in Heretic Heroes is probably the beacon itself, because if you think about a beacon of light that is what, a mile, like, how huge is it? It's gigantic. It's like a mile in diameter or something like that, and it is just shooting straight up into the air. That would be visible for everyone, right? Probably.
the
Like,
curvature of the planet is probably the limiting factor.
But think about it, it's just a gigantic beam of light. It's just shooting straight up into the air. You wouldn't be able to see that. If I'm 50, if think about
I'm
like
thinking
a
of the Luxor
mountain or
pyramid,
something.
right? Which is
Oh, really?
because that's probably the thing that like it's the most,
Oh,
closest
yeah,
analog,
interesting. Yeah,
right?
maybe there's just so much atmospheric interference. I never really answered this for myself, and I don't really care to, I guess. But
Yeah.
the thing I was thinking about is you can see, is it Mount Rainier from Seattle, but it's 130 miles away or something like that. And it's just because mountains are so, like, this is a common thing that like people, like flat earth people, sort of like quote, but what people don't understand is just that, yeah, the thing is 20,000 feet tall, and that's fucking gigantic. So yes, you can see something that is, if you were to get in a car and drive, it would be 2 hours away, but it's still perfectly visible in the skyline just because it's that sort of like huge. Theoretically, if you have a gigantic beam shooting up into the sky, wouldn't everybody be able to see it?
I mean, this is like Denali too, right? That was the thing.
Yeah. Oh, I actually think I am thinking of Denali. Is 130 miles away from what, Anchorage? Somewhere in Alaska. Do you know?
Where it's the
It's got to be Anchorage.
Yeah, it's. I don't think you could see Denali typically from Anchorage just because there's like tons of stuff in the way. But like, I went there in June, and like I didn't see Denali because there's just like clouds in the way all the time. It's like, you know.
Oh yeah. That would make sense.
Because
listen, there's just clouds in the way.
But the like this is actually a thing that I think happens a lot, which is we don't think about real distances as they compare to, like, you know, like I think you changed how far apart the fortresses were around the beacon at least once, right?
Oh, I did. Yeah, because I misremember math. It's because I was thinking they were 8 miles. It's 8 miles into the center of the beacon or something. But I also said that it was 8 miles each fortress, and that would not be true by the math or something like that. We talked about this,
Yeah,
and I was like, "Oh fuck, you guys are right. I'm wrong. I just didn't do the geometry correctly."
but this is like one of those things where, like, when it matters for the mechanics, right? We're gonna figure out what it is. But like, you know, if you were to actually, like, if Heretic Heroes was a hit movie, some physicist nerd would watch the movie and be like, actually, if the beacon was like a mile high and it's like 19,000 lumens, then, you know, this is how far it would be. If you were actually that close, you'd go blind immediately, right? Like that kind of thing. Whereas, like, I don't care, right? Like, you know, and I think that, like, distances, you know, like how far away individual things are, like how far it is to travel any particular amount, is a thing that, like, you just kind of don't care enough about to actually, like, do the math on, unless it's like important for the game. Like, I'm sure you did a bunch of this for 7th Expedition, but
Oh yeah, Seventh Expedition has very intricate math, and there are rules that I definitely bent for the sake of for just like the sake of it. It
expediency.
like makes the gameplay better. We talked about this a little bit last time, where I was talking about how I began to think of Seventh Expedition, the exploration, as just an entirely different game than kind of like combat encounters or just like exploring a sort of like dungeon. That like moving around the hex grid was a game mode that we were engaging in, and I needed to do stuff to make that game mode fun and entertaining, which is why we ended up adding, you know, I added scouting, I added research, right? Just like a bunch of stuff that people could do with their free time at camp. And I standardized some like travel stuff. One of the things that I did was I got rid of the rules around getting lost because they actually sucked, and I didn't realize it until, like, I said to myself, "Oh, the party can get lost, and I'll secretly roll their navigation check or whatever." And it's just like that sounds like a great idea, but like, and they did get lost a couple of times. But like tracking that is kind of such a fucking nightmare on the GM side of things that I eventually just gave up because I was just like, you know what, man, they got lost twice in this campaign already. The effort, you know, I have made the effects clear. They're not getting lost anymore. I'm moving on, right? And I just let them roll the checks straight up this time.
Yeah, I went like,
instead of
I know the Angry GM has a way for, like, dealing with that. I think it's just like you gotta, like, figure out how you're gonna recover from it in a way that's, like, relatively graceful, right?
yeah,
Like,
the rule was that I can't remember what it was. It was when they failed the navigation roll, I rolled a d6 and they ended up, because it's hex grid, they ended up in the square. So you count from the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if they roll a 6, they're ending up in that kind of northwest square, or that northwest sort of hex. And then I created a second secret version of the party on that hex. So they think they're in hex A, but they're actually in hex B. And then I tracked their movements from there, kind of like in kind of parallel, basically. So they're still making all of the same sort of decisions, but then they hit like a river or something, and I was like, "Oh, you guys hit a fucking river," and they're like, "There's no river in this. You guys are," and yeah, that that all that was just way too much, and I was like, "I can't do this anymore."
yeah, I was saying, like, I wonder if there's, like, a good way to, like, do that, which is, like, you know, you roll what, like, if they make the navigation check and, like, you have them automatically discover that they're in the wrong hex at the, like, start of the next attempt, right? Unless they like critically fail, at which point you give them a second, incorrect movement, and uh you do it that way, and that maybe makes it easier to track or something like that. But that's it's its own thing. I honestly don't know how I would do it for an exploration based game like Seventh Expedition. Like the stuff the Angry GM did is like when you're doing point to point navigation, right? Because you're resolving these all individually, and you have like essentially, if you want to take a shortcut through the woods, they screw it up, they end up in a wrong direction, and maybe that has some consequences down the line with that. That's
my rules are based off of the Angry GM rules, but they're not quite one-to-one because specifically because I'm doing like a map clearing mini game essentially, right? Where like they need to fill out every single hex on the map, which is just like a fundamentally like different sort of thing. I do have some thoughts about that kind of stuff that I want to take forward because there are some other games that I think of as exploration games akin to Seventh Expedition, but on a much different sort of scale, basically. For sort of surround. My bet is that I would run kind of differently. This actually the most straightforward example of is the Skittergate, where you guys go to kind of the Skaven, under like the under network, their whole under empire, right? And you are now moving through their underground tunnels and all this other kind of stuff, and like the navigation there. To be fair, I haven't prototyped that whole system out or whatever, but I just think that would work a lot differently because you are not trying to map the whole thing. You are trying to go from point A to point B, but you don't know where point B is. You are essentially turbo lost, and you have to figure out your way out, and moving through hexes and all that kind of stuff carries all of this inherent risk and danger because it is so deep behind enemies.
Makes sense. Yeah. Well, we're comfortably in the back half.
That's true. We're very far off. Do you have any final thoughts on pedestals? I feel like we could.
No, I think we covered what I wanted to get to. Interesting conversation. Good conversation. But how's your week been?
Pretty good. Oh, do you want to hear about these fucking Magic games that we played on Friday? You asked for a summary. I dropped one in the chat. It was pretty fun. We played 4 games pretty quickly. I'd say, I mean, pretty quickly. 4 games in 5 hours or something. Before everyone, it was maybe 4 hours. But it was a pretty good time, and I enjoyed it quite a lot. I love this Takeda deck so much. I told myself that I would play Takeda until I won second with a truly heinous card. I felt like that we all thought we were like, this belongs in. It is basically Perplexing Chimera, but for tapping and untapping. And you don't have to exchange the Chimera. So basically what it says is, it's called Daring Thief. When Daring Thief becomes untapped, you may exchange control of one permanent, like one target permanent with you don't control with target permanent you do control, as long as they share a card type. So you can exchange a creature for a creature, an artifact for an artifact, or whatever. And I executed this insanely janky combo where I was spawning tokens, and then spawning the token untapped all my creatures because of Intruder Alarm, and then I would tap the Daring Thief to Takesha's ability, and then it would untap again, and I would just exchange control of the tokens with everybody. And I did this thing where Josh played his commander, and I Daring Thiefed to steal his commander, and then I Daring Thefted again to give his commander to Sarian, because I just kind of thought it was funnier to not even put it on me, but to give it to Sarian to defend. And that was just, a fucking wild ride. But anyway, if you're looking for a wild, weird, janky card for for Ian Malcolm, Daring Thief really did some fucking wonders.
Yeah, no, it's a cool card, but like it's like not a thing where I like spawn a lot of things that I could trade out, right? Like. Yeah.
Part of it, I do think, is that Tokasia is a token deck. It's a weenies deck. I have a lot of these like little tiny 2/1s that do something, right? Then it's easy to trade that for a big 6/6 beater from somebody else, kind of thing.
Yeah, and also I don't have like a lot of ways to like manually untap Daring Thief, right? Like which is I think part of it. Like the thing that's nice about Perplexing Chimera is like, one, it's you take control of the spell, right? Which is and like you don't have to like
you would get the ETB on like an Atali or something.
Yeah. And I also just think it's fun that like you actually handing off the chimera. I think is actually super fucking fun, right? Like um,
Yeah.
because it's like I think it's like, well, now you've got the thing that can kill me if you want it, right? Like you can fuck me right back, or like have fun like passing it around. It's insanely hard to target too, because like if you try and um like Doomblade it or something, you're just like, okay, you take it, I'm gonna Doomblade your thing, right? Like
Yeah, that is very true. I think I do like Perplexing Chimera as a card. It's the kind of card I feel like I should.
yeah.
I also really fucked Josh with a fog in classic Distraction Maker style. He was like gearing up for this huge attack. He had all these fucking dinosaurs. He ended up winning this game anyway. It didn't even matter, but it was just so funny to me because he was like, I attack Sarian and I do all this stuff, and I say, okay, I play Fog. And he was like, just for that, I'm fucking killing you. And he eventually ended up blasphemous acting his whole board, and then had a thing that was like, whenever a creature is dealt damage, you deal that much damage to any target. And he just pointed 13 damage, missiles right at my forehead, which was a pretty good time. I was honestly, Josh, if you're listening to the podcast, I know you don't listen to the podcast that much. If you're listening to the podcast, I am a little bit sorry about those games. I was a little bit mean to Josh. Josh has pretty good decks. I actually think of Josh as a pretty skilled deck builder, kind of in our crew. And he tends to make, in the strategy circle from Distraction Makers, he makes decks that are very, very butter. I just think basically always Josh has this like, he is just going to assemble an incredibly powerful engine, which sort of makes him, in my mind, the right player to every time. And so I think that is part of where like the animosity kind of comes from. And also, there's a level of I don't know. I know what it's like to be on the receiving, just like everybody's hate, and it is what it is. The second game was also wild because I ended up executing a truly insane infinite combo on like turn 5 that I didn't really understand I was putting together until basically I had this soul ring and I dropped it to Teferi Master of Time on turn 2. Teferi Master of Time is a planeswalker who can use his ability on anybody's turn, and his ability and his first +1, which is unusual for planeswalkers. They normally only work turn at sorcery speed. His +1 was draw and discard a card, right? So with 2 turn rotations, I had looted 8 cards off the top of my deck. I just had insane filtering, basically. And I dug about a quarter of the way through my deck, and I found a powerful planeswalker. And then I executed this insanely jank combo that I didn't really even know was a thing, because there's a card called the Chain Veil, which is an artifact that says you pay 4, you tap it, and then all of your planeswalkers can use an ability again, right? Until end of turn. There is a planeswalker, this other Teferi had untapped target permanent, and it's -1, untap 4 target permanents. And so if you untap a Soul Ring, 2 lands, and the Chain Veil, you can just keep using, as long as you have loyalty counters to go down, you can just keep losing this thing. But the crazy part is, every other Teferi or every other planeswalker on my board saw each individual activation of the Chain Veil. And eventually I got to a point where I could blast the whole table for like 45 fucking damage. But we were all sitting there trying to figure out the combo, because we were just like, okay, I see it. It's gotta be in here somewhere. Let's please, we gotta figure it out. Because like I basically said, I think I'm gonna do something that's gonna make you guys all want. And they were all like, no, you have to demonstrate the combo. So we're all trying to put our heads together to figure out how the combo is going to work so that I can win the game, which is, I think of that as pretty good fun.
I think the norm of like, you must actually demonstrate this combo, but we will actually help you demonstrate the combo is a pretty good norm to have at the table, right? Like,
yeah, I agree with you. And then Frank won the third game. Sorry, that's the fourth game. Frank won the fourth game with the most insane control play of playing the Darkness Crystal. Says whenever a creature dies, you gain, or a creature opponent controls die, you gain 2 life. And then he just wiped a gigantic board. I was already dead, but Josh and Sarian had both just like big boards, and so he played a board wipe and gained like 25 health off of it or whatever. And then all of a sudden, Sarian and Josh both didn't have boards and only had a couple of cards in hand. and we're just like, oh God, how do we close this out? Frank was pretty able to drive it home, which felt really good. I think that control decks. I love control decks. I love playing control decks in Hearthstone so much, but I feel like none of my decks right now are control decks. And the immediate thing I did was I got off of that game and I went to EDH Rec and I started like a true control deck that I could build, right? One that doesn't run that many creatures. It's mostly running kind of card draw and it's trying to, kind of run your opponents out of reason. Cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes sense. I'm still looking forward to playing my 3 new decks. 4 actually.
Listen, we're gonna have Monday nights for it,
Yeah.
pretty soon. Which honestly, I'm pretty, I'm pretty down for it. I'm pretty into. I have not played as much Hollow Knight as I had intended. Mostly because I don't want to, I guess. I played a lot of Factorio, which is so good, and I love every second of it. And even though I get by they're just like a couple of times in Factorio, and I have my factory designed in a particular sort of way. We call this the line, where basically the idea is there are a line of belts and they have like stuff on them, right? And they just keep going to the right. And eventually you just have everything pull off of the line down into and then send it back up into the line. It's just like a really easy way to sort of make make a factory that doesn't get into spaghetti. It's just like a very organized, scalable way to make a factory, except for fucking cliffs, because there are sometimes just like cliffs on the map and you can't do anything. You just have to either tunnel underneath them, which is sometimes hard, but like you can't do a turn when you have 25 lines that are all going parallel. Do you know what I mean? Because like the corner would be insane for something like that. And what are you gonna do? Corner it and then corner it again? Like that's just like that's ridiculous. It's never gonna fucking work. But anyway, Factorio is the greatest. It's surprising me that you haven't got into these kind of.
So
how are you, the software engineer, not into automation games, and me, the free flowing fucking writer?
I rotate shapes in my head for a living. I don't need to do it for fun. No.
That's fair.
I did have a phase where I got really into Factorio for a while. But I wonder what got
Collins has been freaking out.
Yeah, it's Mr. Collins. It's not Colin.
Yeah, Mr. Collins. Yes.
It's a character from
Jane Austen, right?
Yeah. It's
Isn't it Pride and?
Yeah, it's Pride and Prejudice. Yeah, absolutely.
Is it Pride and Prejudice? Okay.
Yeah, because he is the kind of boorish cousin of the the main character's family, who tries to like marry Elizabeth, and she's just like absolutely fucking not.
How did that become this cat's name?
Oh, because my wife's mother named him, and he was kind of like the runt of the litter, and it was a very mean name.
That's fucked up.
Yeah.
But okay.
But he's my boy.
I was like maybe she's like into the Whoopi, you know what I mean? Like maybe she read the book and was like, oh, actually, Elizabeth should have gotten together with Mr. Collins, but I guess if Mr. Collins sucks.
It's just a mean spirit. He's like a boar too, right? Like it's just a mean-spirited name, I guess. But he's a good boy.
He is a good boy. Listen, that's why we solve his fucking brain tumors, apparently.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And the other cat, Miss Charlotte, is named after the poorer girl who eventually does end up marrying Mr. Collins, because he might not be the best person to marry, but like that's the opportunity this woman's going to have, right? Like, yeah. We're talking about games wise before we talk about cats.
Have you beaten Silk Song yet?
No, not even close. Because I knew my brother got married this weekend. Congratulations to Greg. I know you don't usually listen to this podcast, but
congratulations, Grango, friend of the cast, definitively, because you've been on the cast twice, I guess.
Yeah, I think more than like there was that one episode that we did that like didn't record right, and so I like put it as like a bonus part on the back half of.
Oh right, yeah. You're right.
What was I gonna say? Because I knew I was gonna do that, I had my ROG with me. I knew I was gonna play Silk Song, so I ended up playing a bunch of Borderlands. To say we should play at some point, because Hanik's playing a Siren, I'm playing Amon, and I know you're playing Rafa. So there's opportunity there. Um, Basically, I think Buddy and I would just end up joining your game because if the progress doesn't carry across, it won't matter as much. Um, but I've been playing a bit of Silt Song. I don't know have a sense of how far I am into it because I haven't been kind of tracking that kind of thing. I've been trying to keep myself pretty spoiler free, and away from the discourse for a little while. I'm not to be able to escape it completely, but it's a fun game. It is a truer sequel to than most games we get in that like it is like clearly meant you were supposed to have played Hollow Knight because this is a harder, more advanced version of Hollow Knight. As opposed to most things where it's kind of like, oh, you could enter here. I would not recommend entering here. I would recommend playing Hollow Knight first. But it's great. It's a great game. I've been enjoying it a lot. But otherwise, it's just been kind of busy with like life stuff since we last talked. So
fair enough. That makes sense.
Yeah. I don't have anything in particular. I don't think I had any particularly good YouTube videos to recommend.
I have weirdly been watching. I think I'm gonna try and do it for now. Patrick H. Williams put out a video that I really want to watch, which is why are documents movies so compelling? Which is a thing I think about all the time. I sort of love these kinds of movies. Like, do you know like The Big Short? It's not quite a documents movie, but it's a little bit of one.
What is a documents movie? Define this for me.
Hold on, let me go look at I have not watched because I have not watched Night of the Coconut, but I need to. Night of the Coconut is like the end of that whole arc that I loved so much, the Charles saga. I told myself I was going to watch Night of the Coconut, but I just kind of like built it up in my head that now it's been 4 years and I still haven't. Documents movies, Patrick H. Williams. Documents movies. Okay, one is Zodiac, which is my favorite David Fincher movie. I think that movie is so fucking good. Another one is Spotlight, which is another movie that I think of as amazing. That's I think the Best Picture winner, about the sort of way the Catholic Church covered up child abuse. Aaron Brockovich is right up front as another one. I don't particularly love Aaron Brockovich in the same way that I love those other two, but I do love Steven Soderbergh, and he is the director of that movie. And then the last one is All the President's All the President's Men.
I've not seen any of these movies.
You haven't seen All the President's Men?
No.
Wow. That's crazy. That movie's actually, I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I still don't, the Watergate scandal, I think, really suffers from the fact that it's hard to comprehend, right? Like, what actually did Richard Nixon do that was so, like, wrong? And that movie doesn't do a very good job of even explaining it. It just kind of takes it for granted that you understand the kind of gravity of the crime that Nixon was engaging in at the time. But the process by which they find out about it is really compelling, and I think that was a big like Oscar winner. It's from like the.
There's actually I need to go like down this rabbit hole because I have heard it mentioned, but I haven't actually like listened to. I think the name it's like the podcast called Raising the Dead. I think part of the thesis of the first season of that show is that like actually Nixon did a thing that was kind of like not exactly would not have been viewed as like particularly controversial, like in like if you knew like people were doing this all the time and you just happened to get caught. And so like I said, I need to go like down the rabbit hole and make sure that I'm getting that correct because I'm not super confident in that. But the idea is basically like Nixon kind of got a raw deal just because like it was like this conflicts of like exposure and like things that like got known about, but it wasn't actually that crazy in terms of like the things that previous presidents had done. It's just like there was less ability for people to find out about them, that kind of thing.
That's interesting. I don't know anything about previous presidents, but I do know quite a lot about the Watergate saga. If you want to follow the rabbit hole that I did on this, Sean Munger has really 4.5 hours or something. It's really long. But the thing he does that is so unique is he goes location by location. So basically, instead of a instead of a YouTube video that sort of tells the whole story front to end chronologically, really what it does is it looks at specific locations that are included in sort of Nixon and his life, and it puts the picture together that way. And for some reason, just kind of the orthogonal way that it told this really helped me kind of rock it. And also there's a lot of crazy details in there that you're just like, wait, what? A guy who wrote spy thriller movies was able to convince, I don't actually think it was technically the president, it was the chief of staff, that he could break into the Democrat Party headquarters and bug the phone lines. And the only reason that they figured it out is because he had duct taped the door open and the janitor saw it, and like all of the rest of the stuff. So, yeah. I'm surprised you don't like because there's also sort of like this isn't quite documents movie, but it's a little bit of like legal movies. Like, how do you feel about like, legal movies?
I don't have an opinion on these. I haven't seen them. I don't dislike
No,
them.
I understand. But like, you obviously are an enjoyer of like, I don't know, law and legal stuff and lawyers making lawyer stuff happen or whatever. Like, I'm trying to think of like what's like because there's obviously stuff like, I don't know. My Cousin Vinny is maybe like the most simple, accessible version of this, but like there's a lot of them, right? The Rainmaker is the Francis Coppola one. A lot of these were in the 90s. Like, there was the.
Well, tell me what a documents movie is, because
I think what a documents movie is about the process of like an extreme researcher putting the details of a thing kind of together, and you go along with them right in front of sort of their eyes as you figure this kind of like stuff out. Another one that came out is Dark Waters. You know about Teflon? Dark Waters is the.
I know this is like the Mark. That's the Hulk. The Hulk.
Yeah. Mark Ruffalo is the lawyer. Basically, the story of that one is that he works at a law firm. He works at a law firm that specializes in sort of defending chemical companies from frivolous sort of like lawsuits, and he ends up filing a lawsuit against the chemical company, and he's in the position of he knows all of their tricks because he is a lawyer who knows all of their tricks. And the other thing is the company tries to bury him in paperwork by just sending reams and reams. In Discovery, they send everything, right? But what they actually did was kind of hand him the smoking. They sent him all this paperwork because they were essentially saying, you're looking for a needle in a haystack. Good luck, buddy. And he was like, I take that as a fucking challenge. And he found the needle. And that's what's so amazing about that movie. It's not a particularly good or a like transcendent movie or anything else. And I actually don't like how moralistic it is, to be honest with you. But the process of watching a guy systematically figure out how to find the needle in the haystack is really neat. Like that's cool. Anyway, he has this video on Documents Movie. It came out a couple of months ago. I have decided I really want to fucking watch it. So that's the YouTube stuff I'm doing right now. Plus, it's also easy to watch this stuff because I've seen it a million times. While you're playing Factorio, you have a lot of room in your brain for this stuff because you're just like placing belts.
I do have two standout videos that I want to recommend. One is what's it called? Most exciting guessing game in the world, which I've shut up before, but it's the group is Grouse House. They're like the super group that Auntie Donna is part of. But they recently released an episode with some people from New Zealand, and the idea is, have you ever heard like of the Party Hosts game? It's like an improv game. Basically, you have one player who's the party host, and you have three or four players who are like the guests, and the host has to guess what the thing about the guests is, right? Like in a normal version of this game, it will be like, you're a monkey with a hat, right? And like you have to guess what like the characters are at the time. The way they play the most upsetting guessing game in the world is they give them the most absurd characteristics, and it takes them like forever to figure out what the fuck is happening, right? Like one of the ones in this one is the host. The host is one New Zealand comedian, but one of the players is his brother, like his real life brother. And so the trait that they gave his brother is that every time he speaks to you, you act like, you know, personally offended and like he's just doing this for the camera, right? And so like, you know, he comes in and he's like, "Hi, how you doing?" It's like, "Oh, you know, you're gonna be like that, right?" Like, you know, it, and so like it's just like it is always the most. It takes people like an hour, and they end up usually just like hating everybody and hating the entire experience. It is the most hilarious thing in the world to watch. I absolutely love it. I recommend it to everybody.
This reminds me of have you done Scribble? I mean, you know Pictionary, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
Scribble.io is Pictionary but for free as a browser game. This is something we do at my work all the time because then you are adding in extra like piece of the puzzle, which is that drawing with a mouse is insanely stupid. And so you get, and you know, just putting ridiculous things in the thing. We were doing one for like Akupara games, naming specific Akupara games. It's like, how do I do sorry we're closed in a way that you'll get it in 20? Like, and then I ended up trying to do like the, you know, the Duchess is the character in the key art who has, you know, her tongue out. She's going like, ah. I drew a big tongue and I was trying to like get people on board with something like that. But the hardest ones were like final boss. Because just like what do you do for final boss, right? Another one was it was like it's a save game. No, it was save game. And so it was save game and somebody drew a Dark Souls bonfire.
Ooh.
And we all got it on that, which was very clever. It's like that kind of stuff I think is really neat
Yeah.
in these kinds of like guessing games.
That sounds like a fun normal version of this. Like I said, it's improv characters like, you know, losing their minds trying to figure out what the fuck is happening, right? This one was particularly good because the host basically his whole shtick was like, you know, like kind of like being very belligerent about it and being like, "I'm close enough, I got it," right? And it's like, "No, you don't understand the purpose of this game," right? Like, and so like the first 10 minutes, he gets a little. I was like, "Is he gonna work?" And it's like the fact that he's just like so belligerent about it, just like passes through the other side. It's fucking hilarious. The other one I want to point out, which is maybe kind of ties into the episode topic, is the name of the person is Luke Humphreys. I first saw this on Reels, but you can also get it on YouTube. The series is called The Pinky Guard, and the premise is that this alien being called Silithil the Undying like crashes on Earth, and humanity manages to kill it, but he keeps regenerating, and so there are people whose job is just to keep killing it over and over again. And so the Pinky Guard is the guy who like flamethrowers the pinky every time it regenerates, and it's you know, you could go a bunch of ways. This is like lighthearted and funny, and there's like 7 of them at this point, and they're like 30 seconds a piece. I just think it's pretty great, right? Like it's like, you know, it's like, you know, oh, we, you know, we keeps trying to get out of this, keep spraying with the flamethrower. This probably isn't going to end well. You know, just like, you know, it is. I highly recommend it. It's a fun little thing. I highly recommend following along with it as it comes out. Yeah. I think those are all my big things. We're at like an hour 40. You have anything else you want to talk about, or should we get out of here?
No, I'm good. We can get there.
All right. Well, if you'd like to email us about any things we talked about in this podcast, email us at derpsgames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsgames.com. You can follow us on twitch.tv/derpsgames or youtube.com/derpsgames, where these go out live. Rate, review us wherever you find podcasts. All the links will be down in the description. Buddy, do you have anything else you're looking to promote?
You know, I don't think I have anything I'm looking to promote.
Well, in that case, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.